has close to 20 years of consulting experience helping clients with their strategy and business transformation initiatives. He primarily focuses on advising clients in the consumer, lifestyle, and luxury retail sector, including gems and jewelry. Firstly, we are having this presentation with Mr. Praveen, and after that, we will begin with our session. Thank you so much.
Hope I'm audible. Good afternoon, everyone. So let me, I've heard a lot of stories since morning. Uh, yeah, I've heard a lot of stories since morning. I thought, let me start with a small story myself. And this is a very personal story. I'm not sure if anybody here would have heard, a couple of members from my team maybe. So this is about a story about 7 years back, 7 to 8 years back. My wife and I, we had a son who was just born. And he was born with a couple of prenatal teeth. I don't know how many of you have heard prenatal teeth. Anybody here who had prenatal teeth? Obviously not. I don't think we would have remembered our birth, but anybody in the family? So prenatal teeth is very simple, right? It's like teeth. As soon as he was born, he had 2 teeth already, the lower jaw. So that was prenatal teeth. Now you may be wondering what is the connection of prenatal teeth with the Gems and Jewellery event, right? So now imagine what has happened after that. Now, obviously, he started playing after a year, 2 years, started running around, and he fell one day, and he fell on his jaw, and one of the tooth came out. And unfortunately, I was the one with him on that day, and I couldn't find the teeth. I came back home. I told my wife that he fell, a little bit of blood, and the tooth is gone. She was crazy at me, right? She said, how could you do that? I said, it's okay. Anyway, it would have fallen, right, after a few years, and then anyway, the permanent teeth would come. But she was furious. She said, how could you do that? I mean, this is something that I wanted to keep as a long-term thing, right? You want to conserve, preserve, and she had many plans, apparently, of keeping that intact. So I said, okay, now, one is gone. I went, searched the whole thing. Obviously, I couldn't find it. Now, the good part was he was born with 2, so there was one more. So, so I said, let's try and conserve this one, right? Now, then the story started. Now, how do you? She said, obviously it's very emotionally connected. I want to keep it for long. She asked me a few ideas. Now, how can we do this? And I also want to pass it to the next generation, to him probably, or whoever he marries, whatever, right? So now I gave her a few ideas, including ideas like like the ones you see outside, right? Large glass boxes, and I said maybe we can put in one of those, and then that will kind of preserve it for long, right? We'll try and make it airtight, etc. She said no, none of those ideas will work. Then she herself came with an idea. She said, why don't we convert that into jewelry? So that's essentially the connection, right? So it's highly emotional. This is how the consumer is also thinking, right? So obviously I want to talk about the consumer here. So this is how the consumer is thinking. You want to preserve. It's obviously invaluable, right? You can't value that tooth. It's for long term, and obviously there's a law. There's an emotional connect that is there with that, right? And that's what jewelry means to a lot of us. Consciously or unconsciously, we buy into jewelry because of this same reason, right? So that's just a quick story I thought before I start my presentation. So my name is Praveen Govindu. I'm a partner with the Deloitte Consulting Practice. I do a lot of work in the retail consumer space, specifically focus on luxury jewelry as subsector within retail. And I thought I'll bring to you the story on the consumer side. It's been very insightful of the various sessions I've heard since morning. A lot of stories have been told. Really, grateful for, towards GJPC for also having me here on the stage to talk on the consumer side. So I'll just move forward. Yeah. So obviously a lot of data here, but I thought let me start with how the global gems and jewelry sector looks like, right? You would see that this is expected to become a $500 billion market globally, right? And I'm only talking about gems and jewelry sector here. Uh, it's almost close to $500 billion, and you can see the various shades, right? Various countries. A very distinguishing thing, India is currently number two, probably number two, number three, right? But expected to probably become the largest, almost on par with China in the next decade, right? By 2030. That's what we expect, the growth in the market. So India is going to become, I mean, this when I say India, it's a domestic market, right? It's essentially going to become the largest, so to say, market for us. So India is a huge market, and you're actually seeing a lot of interest, even from global jewelers now looking at India, right? While we're all looking at how to conquer some of the countries outside, but even a lot of international jewelers are very keen, and we are personally also working with some clients who are keen to enter India. So competition is going to intensify because obviously the market is huge, right? And there are certain trends. I've just highlighted some very key trends in some of these geographies. Uh, See, one of the common themes seems like we're all going back to the past, right? You can see words like vintage, you can see words like heritage. I'm sure you've heard about Gufa gold in China. It's all about those intricate designs which have a cultural connect. So a lot of design, and the panel which spoke just before this, it seems like it is going back to those heritage, and how do you bring that legacy out, right? So that seems like a common trend across, and and India would probably not be away from that trend, and I'll speak a little more about India in the coming slides. And the other key trend you see is organized retail, right? Again, I have a point, a statistic to share, but organized retail is also going to increase in its share, right? One other trend which I could also point here is the share of this market, right, between jewelry, natural diamond lead, and LGDs. I know lab-grown diamonds is a big topic of late, but yes, increasingly we also expect lab-grown diamonds to take a share of the pie. For the jeweler, it doesn't really impact as long as you're buying, the consumer is buying the jewelry. So you can see that natural diamond and lab grown diamond share pretty much will be almost similar range in the next decade or so, right? So that's just a quick snapshot of the global market. Now this is a slightly interesting slide, and I'm sure GJPC will also be very interested. I'm sure some of this data is thanks to the work that Gems and Jewelry Export Promotion Council and World Gold Council do. You can clearly see these are the trade flows, right? And there are quite a few arrows on the chart. And in the context of the previous slide, while India is going to become $150 billion, there is still $350 billion of market outside of India. And while this chart today it still represents only 2022. So honestly, we have to still do a study to predict how these trade flows would look like in 2030. But I can clearly see that this map could change drastically in 2030. Today, let's say USA is the largest importer of gems and jewelry, and this is only jewelry. This doesn't have your diamonds and cut polished diamond CPD in that. It's just gold jewelry. So, so USA, yes, is obviously one of the largest importers of jewelry today. From China, from India, you can see $3 billion. From China, another $3 billion, right? And then followed by Europe. But then I thought I'll just put this slide to show the possibilities for a country like India. While the domestic market is huge, what could be the larger play that we could have, from a global standpoint, right? Obviously now with the India, UAE pact, some of these trade flows will again get impacted, because there's a lot of exports that also happen from UAE, right? Let's say into Europe, into US. So again, how does that impact these trade flows? So huge opportunity again, China, Hong Kong, that pairing. There's again, and the size, the width of the arrow also denotes the trade flow there, right? You can see that's a very wide arrow there. So again, a lot of this will get impacted. So this is a static slide, but we expect that there will be a significant shift in how this slide would look, in 2030. Now, let me talk a little bit about India gems and jewelry market itself. Uh, and obviously, we project it to be almost 75 $80 billion in 2023. Again, by 2030, almost expected to double, right? And what are some of the key drivers that is that is expected to impact this demand and supply? So, as per Deloitte, we've done a survey, and almost 110 million households, the point on the left, right? We expect an additional 110 million middle class households. And I think Som was talking in the morning that every 1% increase in income would increase, 1% growth for jewelry. Directly applies here, right? We have 110 new households who would be coming into that middle class category, whose aspirations are huge to buy into categories like luxury, buy into categories like jewelry, and that is essentially going to drive a lot of demand going forward, right? And that's one big thing. Then the second driver, as you see, is obviously for reasons like geopolitical reasons, there are two categories or two segments which have seen huge growth post the Ukraine-Russia war or even the recent war, right? The Israel-Hamas war. So, can you name those two categories? It's pretty easy. I think one of them is jewelry. It's easy to guess. But the other one, not related, but any guesses? Which is the other segment which actually had a big growth because of the geopolitical issues? Yeah, investment, but in which segments? Absolutely. So real estate, right? And within real estate and jewelry also, it's the luxury, the premium segments have had a huge increase in demand because somewhere, these are two categories or two segments, right, which also are preserving well. So a lot of HNIs and ultra HNIs have shifted their investments from the typical investments that they otherwise do, let's say stock market and some of the other investments in private equity, etc., into real estate and jewelry. So that's also driving a lot of demand, and we have seen, right, how the demand supply equation, supply is still higher but the price are also going up, so some of this probably is contributing that. We also see that 15% of total Indian household assets are in gold, right? So that's again a significant proportion of money that is being put into gold. Now there are some other drivers, right? So there is wedding related. Again, everybody here knows that wedding is a big driver of jewelry purchase in our country. So I'm not going to talk a lot about it. But there are two trends here, right? There's almost 60% of the total orders, and this is at an e-commerce level, not jewelry specific. Almost 60% of this, e-commerce business is currently being driven by tier 2, tier 3 cities in our country. And again, I keep asking this question in some of the forums that I attend. Which is that, can you guys guess which is that city, or not a city, I would say, a town in India which has the highest e-commerce penetration? Any guesses? It's a tier 2 city. Bangalore is almost a, it's a metro, so it's a tier 2 city. Indore, no, close. South, it's in South India. Vellore, close. Coimbatore, very close. These are all in the top 10, but the answer is Chennai is a metro. No. But the answer is, I'll give you the answer, it's Guntur. Okay, so Guntur is essentially the city, and I don't know whether there's anybody from Amazon, Flipkart here, but that's a place which actually has the highest e-commerce business. So if there are 100 rupees of consumption happening, majority of that is happening on e-commerce, and within the cities which have highest e-commerce penetration, Guntur is the highest, right? So that's the kind of aspiration those towns have. See, that it's not that the consumption was not happening before, right? There was always consumption happening in these cities. Maybe these people who were probably coming to the larger cities to do the consumption. So there was always disposable income. And Guntur, I'm sure a lot of you know, it's in one of those most agri-rich belts, right? They grow chili, and there's a lot of money on the back of that. So there's always disposable income. The challenge was always access and reach. So e-commerce is able to do that. And I'm sure a lot of you also must be thinking how we can look at e-commerce. So a lot of offline players, now most national brands are opening up their e-commerce journeys or transforming their business through e-commerce. So that's going to stay. And how do you integrate that channel into the larger scheme of business is going to be important, right, going forward. And the other trend is Gen Zs and millennials, and how they are going to also shape, the narrative going forward. And here, while I have a story towards the end of the slide, maybe I'll just articulate it right away. See, some of these people, as you can see, the demand is for lightweight jewelry, right? And I think I also heard a conversation which talked about MRP driven sales. A lot of this is connected, right? If you look at India and the evolution across categories, not just jewelry, you talk about a product, right? And because most brands focused on giving the best product and a value-based product, right? As Indians, we always like to see value in what we are buying, even if it is a luxury product. And then, from there it became product plus service. Now we are all talking about experience, that how do we give the best experience to our consumers. But I think the story is moved beyond. Now the story is all about story, and I think somebody in the previous panel also spoke about story, right? It's all about the consumer trying to connect with the brand and with the story that the brand is communicating. And that's going to drive the next wave of growth. And this segment, especially the Gen Zs and millennials, they are very keen to hear a story from the brand, right? They're not buying into a product anymore or the service or the experience. Now that is expected now. What they're expecting is there something beyond to which they can actually connect to, right? So that's hence the storytelling becomes very important. And again, there are some trends I'll speak on the consumer side on the next slide. See, on the supply side, I think I've covered. Again, we expect today 38% is organized in terms of the penetration of jewelry retail. Almost that is expected to become 55% by 2030. And again, a statistic, right? Almost 40% of the stores that you see today by some of the large organized players have actually come up in the last 4 years, right? So that's again something that shows how fast the market is growing, particularly on the organized side. So these are certain consumer trends that we see in the jewelry sector. Again, I think most of these are something that you are aware of, whether it is looking at designs, whether it is convenience, whether it is value-added services, lightweight, right? But like I said, online is another key trend. Obviously, categories beyond women, right? So men, kids. So these are one of the points I want to really touch upon is the point on sustainability and ethics, right? We have done one survey, global survey. I'm talking about global survey across, and this is a Deloitte survey. One of the findings of that survey was that Indian consumer came as the number 2. I mean, number 1, there was a different country which came as number 1. One of the, and it's an easy guess which of those countries those are. But India came as number 2 when it came to climate consciousness. And this was not a survey which was done at the top tier of a consumer. It was done across tiers of consumer. And this was also a stark revelation for a lot of us, because even consumers who are at the grassroots, right, and particularly jewelry sees a lot of demand across consumer cohorts, right, because wedding is omnipresent. So the awareness about climate and sustainability is highest, or second highest, I would say, globally for Indian consumer, and hence I think that is a trend for a lot of for a lot of jewelers to watch out for. How can we communicate a story to our consumer linked to sustainability and climate is going to dictate how our Gen Zs or the next millennials are going to buy into, right? So that's one key trend that we like to call out. So lastly, I just want to end. I know I have kind of run out of time. So this is what we have articulated as the 6 forces which are shaping this jewelry sector, specifically in India, while I think it is applicable globally. I spoke about changing consumer, so rising income levels, growing urbanization, the demographic dividend, all of that is expected to impact. So personalization, connecting with a story, this is very, very important. Significance of festivals and occasions, again, this This applies now to almost all categories. In fact, I'm not sure I spoke about it. Today, apparently, almost 60% of the spend that is happening in the retail sector in general and in specifically in jewelry, almost 60% of that is being influenced by a specific occasion, right? So occasions will continue to drive, demand and growth. I didn't speak a lot about technology, but this is going to be one of the other big forces that we expect to shape the sector. I think we are all seeing omni-channel, one view of customer, one view of inventory, one view of the product. These are all important for the end consumer because consumers are looking at shopping at their own convenience, right? And we all do that. Can we, as jewelers or as brands, offer that seamless experience across different channels? Is important today. Still, it is very siloed, right? I'm sure a lot of the companies that are here would have one team just looking at e-commerce, one team looking at stores. But how can you integrate and get them to talk to each other will be very important. New technologies like generative AI, I think somebody in the audience spoke. It is going to be a major shift in terms of how you leverage tech. If you are able to collect data today in terms of the product, in terms of the consumer buying behavior, there is a lot that generative AI could do. So again, a big trend that we expect, which will shape the sector. I did speak about omni-channel, and the other thing is growing international opportunities. So there's a huge opportunity. We can see $350 billion market out there. So there's a lot of international possibilities for the Indian companies to go abroad. But likewise, the similar story is being played in those markets that India is a big market, right? And hence there's a lot of focus, a lot of attention that is being given to India as a country. Obviously, it will become the number 2 or the number 3 economy in the near future. So you can also see intensifying competition in the country as well. I spoke about climate and planet, and some of the economic policies which are also helping drive demand from a sector perspective. So that's broadly what I had to share. If there is time for any further questions, happy to. Otherwise, thanks a lot. You've been a great audience. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. We request Mr. Sabyasachi to please join us on the dais. We would like to deliver a token of appreciation to Mr. Praveen. Thank you so very much. That was once again an outstanding session. I would say, in fact, it was. Thank you so much for actually sharing a lot of valuable insights with us. That's truly commendable. Everybody, let's have a huge round of applause for Mr. Praveen Govindu. Along with that, ladies and gentlemen, now we are beginning with our session that is driving the new age business with our moderator of the session. We request the moderator of